Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is 100% to blame for any tariffs that will be placed on Canadian imports by President Donald Trump. Alberta Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz has called on the remaining Canadian banks in a United Nations banking alliance created by Liberal leader hopeful Mark Carney to abandon ship, and it may already be having an effect. Alberta said its hands are tied and accused its federal and local partners for delaying the rebuild in Jasper. Calgary City Council voted to maintain its pay increases despite affordability concerns and widespread opposition. All of this and more in this week's episode of the Alberta Roundup. My name's Isaac Lamoureux, your host of the show, and it's wonderful to be here with you again. Let's hop into that first story now. Smith said that despite President Donald Trump postponing his tariff threat until February 1st, if any tariffs materialize, Trudeau should shoulder 100% of the blame. In fact, let's hop right into a clip of what she said during a media roundtable. Here's what she had to say.
Let's be super clear about why we find ourselves in the situation that we're in today. It lands 100% at the feet of Justin Trudeau, who even just a few weeks ago gave a speech where he thought it was an affront to women that Kamala Harris didn't win. We're in a trade negotiation with a brand new administration, and we have a prime minister who keeps on poking his finger in the eye of the current administration and has damaged that relationship. So if there's a failure, it lands at his feet, which is why I'm counting down the days to when he's gone and we can have a reset. It's 47 days to go, and I hope he doesn't continue torching the relationship in the meantime. All I can do is try to repair and build relationships that should have been repaired and built over the last 4 years. That is what we do by having our office in Washington. We have good relationships with people on both sides of the aisle because that is what diplomacy is. You have to be able to work with both Democrats and Republicans, and you have to refrain from expressing a preference for who you would like in the White House. And so if there's a failure of leadership and if there's a damage to the relationship, it's 100% at the feet of Justin Trudeau.
Smith said she's doing what she can to negotiate with the United States' administration through her province's Washington office. Smith held the media briefing where she bashed Trudeau from Washington, D.C., where she had been meeting with various U.S. governors, senators, and business leaders over the last few days. She called on all premiers to do the same because there will be a new prime minister in 47 days, and likely another new prime minister shortly thereafter. Due to the rapid turnover of the federal government, premiers will be the only consistent voices in negotiations. Despite being a provincial premier, Smith clarified that she was negotiating for all Canadians and not seeking a specific carve-out for her province alone. Smith's negotiations for Canada to remain tariff-free have focused on the mutually beneficial relationship between the two countries and that the United States has a $58 billion trade surplus without energy. And this was confirmed by the National Bank of Canada's report. The day before meeting with reporters, Smith issued a press release with 6 steps the country could take to avoid future tariffs being imposed. One suggestion was to restore immigration levels to those under former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Some others were to double down on border security and hit Canada's 2% GDP NATO target. Whether the tariffs come on February 1st or April 1st, as suggested by the executive order, Smith doubled down on her preferred approach of collaboration over retaliation. She previously refused to support a potential export tax on Alberta energy. Following a meeting between the country's premiers and the Prime Minister last Wednesday, Alberta refrained from signing the joint statement that outlined the proposed retaliatory measures to Trump's tariffs. Every other premier and Trudeau signed it. Trudeau recently said he supports matching tariffs dollar for dollar with the US. Ontario Premier Doug Ford echoed Trudeau's call for dollar tariffs. I'm curious to ask, what do you think of Smith opposing the approach of Trudeau and other premiers? Is she the only one in the right, or is she out to lunch? Smith explained that Canada's economy is 1/10 the size of the US's and that Canada is much more reliant on its southern partner than vice versa. She said, quote, "Trying to go tit for tat in a tariff war without addressing the underlying issues is not going to go well for Canada." Despite Smith's reluctance, an Ipsos poll from the same day as her press conference highlighted that 82% of Canadians support a retaliatory tariff. However, Smith said that she doesn't govern based on opinion polls. Smith said, quote, This is a relationship that's lasted more than 100 years. We have, from time to time, skirmishes, but you don't torch an 100-year relationship over a temporary problem. She added, you identify the issues that are causing the irritation and then you work through them one at a time. Instead of fighting, Smith wants to double down on oil production and pipeline capacity. She wants to get as many projects on the go during this 4-year administration before a potential change in government and change in energy stewardship leads to abandoning projects, much like what happened with Keystone XL. So moving on to our next story here, I wrote an exclusive this week on how Alberta Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz was calling on the 4 remaining Canadian banks in a United Nations banking alliance created by Liberal leader hopeful Mark Carney to abandon ship. And her call is already having an effect. So I wrote the exclusive on Monday, and one of the 4 remaining banks, Scotiabank, withdrew from the alliance on the very same day. Schultz said, quote, the alliance is a bit of a scam. It's designed to give Liberals like Carney a platform to virtue signal about the environment, but it's also designed to attack industries who are actually lowering emissions. She told True North that it was only a matter of time until the alliance used its leverage to restrict financing to other industries it doesn't like, such as mining, forestry, and more. She added that any such attacks would result in a higher cost of living for Albertans and Canadians, as they would result in a worse economy, less money, and fewer jobs. On top of all the negatives, Schultz said that international agreements like the alliance do nothing to actually reduce global emissions. Schultz said, quote, it's time to bring back common sense and put the prosperity of our people ahead of ideological liberal policies. Before Scotiabank withdrew on Monday, 4 Canadian banks withdrew from the alliance on January 17th. The 4 banks that withdrew were CIBC, TD, National Bank of Canada, and BMO. The departures followed various banks in the United States leaving, to name a few: JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, and much more. Every bank in the alliance has signed the commitment statement. The commitment forces banks to transition greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050 or earlier. Banks must also set 2030 targets within 18 months of joining the alliance, along with a 2050 target and interim goals to be met every 5 years. The Net Zero Banking Alliance is part of the Glasgow Financial Alliance, which Carney assembled in 2021. Working as the UN's Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance, he previously called on banks to join the alliance before COP26 in 2021. Schultz told True North that she hopes all Canadians put pressure on the remaining banks in the alliance to abandon the, quote, ideological and out-of-touch policies. She said, quote, it's time for Ottawa to abandon their ideological and partisan pet projects and start putting Canadian families and workers first once again. Schultz also took aim at Carney in her statement to True North. She said, quote, he's a multi-millionaire Liberal elite and Justin Trudeau's top economic advisor. He likes to claim he's a political outsider. He's no such thing. He's as big of an insider as it gets. Schultz said that Carney's environmental activism is no different than that of the Liberal NDP government. She added that he's supported policies throughout his career that harm Alberta's main industries and increase the cost of living for every Canadian, like the carbon tax, the proposed oil and gas cap, the energy transition, and even Greta Thunberg's Shut It Down movement, which he allegedly considers himself a part of. Schultz said, quote, Canadians may not know who he is yet, but we know his work. Mark Carney is just another out-of-touch Liberal elite disconnected from the everyday concerns of Albertans. The 3 remaining banks in the alliance are Coast Capital, RBC, and Van City. Van City told True North that it remains committed to delivering on emissions reduction and achieving net zero, which it believes the alliance is an important part of. Getting into our next story here, the Alberta government said it can't move towards rebuilding Jasper unless the federal government, the municipality, and Parks Canada hold up their end of the bargain. The province said it can't proceed with its $112 million plan to provide 250 modular homes due to delays and obstacles from Parks Canada and the municipality of Jasper. Alberta's Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services, Jason Nixon, said that the province was on track to deliver 250 homes, but that Alberta cannot proceed without land. He said, quote, it's been radio silence from Ottawa since Premier Danielle Smith sent a letter to the Prime Minister nearly a month ago. Smith echoed the concerns in her own post to X. She said, quote, "This is unacceptable. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his federal government are in disarray, and they are leaving the poor people of Jasper behind." Nixon said the province allocated $112 million to build 250 single-family homes by early 2025, contingent on Parks Canada and the municipality of Jasper providing the land. However, Nixon said, quote, "They have not followed through on their promise." He added that the municipality and Parks Canada have also asked the province to build outside of the national park and tear down $100 million worth of housing once the town is rebuilt, which he deemed unreasonable demands. Nixon said, quote, "At this point in time, the province's hands are tied. This is outside of the province's jurisdiction, and we cannot build housing without the cooperation of the park, the federal government, and the municipality." Parks Canada said in a recent interim housing update that it has made over 4 hectares of land available for interim housing, equivalent to 4 CFL fields. The organization said it is in the process of securing high-density interim housing solutions consisting of work camp-style accommodation of 120 single units. Additionally, Parks Canada said it had initiated the procurement process for 50 duplex units, totaling 100 units. The agency also said it purchased 4 pre-built housing units that are ready to be delivered to Jasper. The municipality of Jasper's Director of Recovery, Michael Fark, said that the Government of Alberta's offer is appreciated but unrealistic. He said, quote, "With the Government of Alberta's requirement for permanent single detached units, using all of the serviceable 4.25 hectares of available land would only yield approximately 60 single detached units, far below the 250 units of housing support announced." The Jasper rebuild has 5 phases. According to Parks Canada, it is currently in Phase 2, Design Your Build, with construction scheduled for Phase 4 and occupancy planned for Phase 5. The Jasper wildfires caused nearly $1 billion in damage and destroyed a third of the town, resulting in 360 square kilometers of burned or partially burned area and 358 destroyed structures. Nixon said, quote, "Our hearts break for those who lost their homes and are now receiving the incredibly disappointing news that their return to Jasper may be further delayed. We continue to call upon the federal government to meet their obligations in their national park." Parks Canada told True North that it remains flexible to work with all levels of government to resolve housing needs resulting from the wildfires. So our next story is on our favorite city to cover on the show, which is, of course, Calgary. Calgary City Council rejected a motion to freeze salaries at 2024 levels after various councillors and the mayor presented the proposal the week before. The motion proposed freezing salaries at 2024 levels, which would have actually resulted in a slight pay decrease for the mayor and councillors, since their recent raise would be rolled back. The motion resulted in a 7-7 vote, and ties always result in motions being defeated, but this motion needed actually a 2/3 majority to pass because the previous raises were approved on the average weekly earnings formula. The start of 2025 saw the mayor and councillors receive a 3.07% pay increase, bringing the total raises to 9.49% since 2022. Councillors are paid about $124,000 annually, and the mayor makes just over $220,000 a year, more than Premier Danielle Smith, who makes about $185,000 annually. City Councillor Sonia Sharp introduced the motion and had some strong words following its defeat. Sharp said she believes councillors should have a set wage throughout their 4-year term. She said, quote, "When you run for council, you should know what you'll be paid. And if you're only running for the prospect of a raise every year, you're running for the wrong reasons." One of the councillors who voted against the motion, thereby supporting the wage increase, Jennifer Wines, defended her vote. She said, quote, "Our wages go up and down with Albertans' wages as directed by citizens. Calgary's economy is doing well and wages are improving." But even Gondek said elected officials should not take pay raises while Calgarians are struggling. She said, quote, "Calgarians are struggling with higher grocery bills, increasing utility rates, and inflation. If we're asking city administration to find efficiencies and Calgarians to stretch their budgets, we must hold ourselves to the same standard." Canadian Taxpayers Federation Alberta Director Chris Sims told True North that the council should not only freeze pay raises, but also refocus on the municipal government's core purposes: to keep the streets and infrastructure safe, clean, and in good repair. She said, quote, "Being a city councillor was never supposed to be a full-time dream career for politicians who want to save the world. It was supposed to be a part-time role for people like small business owners, retired teachers, and former cops. So a stipend for their public service was just fine." Sharp took a similar stance in her rebuke of the vote. She said, quote, "If you don't want to run because you don't get a raise every year, then you know what? maybe it's not the job for you. Maybe you're running for the wrong reasons. I know that this job requires a lot of work, but it's really the impact that we have on Calgarians, and they see that. So that wraps up our stories for the week. Let's hop into the comment roundup. The first comment comes from @LouisHislop, VO8LH, who said, quote, I'm so disappointed with my Premier Scott Moe. He should be standing shoulder to shoulder with Alberta and Smith. Stay strong, Alberta. True Canadians stand with you. Yeah, I found this interesting to add because of the rift we've seen recently forming between Smith and the other premiers and Trudeau, notably when she refused to sign the joint statement regarding the Trump tariffs that I previously discussed in this show. I'm curious to ask whether you think more premiers will join her side, as there seems to be some suggestions that they soon might, or will they continue down the path of trying to be combative with the US? The next comment comes from @DianeVC4361, who said, quote, just another Trudeau. Public beware. This was among a clear theme of comments against Carney, and I could have chosen any of the hundreds. You all clearly had a great disliking of Carney and are skeptical of what he might do in power. Let's remember, the person who wins the Liberal leadership election will immediately become the Prime Minister without an election from the Canadian people. Another person @RickVervoot9536 said, quote, thank you, Mark, for keeping us safe from the truth. Yeah, Rick, that one made me chuckle, so I thought I'd throw it in. This was, of course, in relation to the fact that Carney banned independent media, including True North and myself, from his campaign launch. I'm curious, though, do you think Carney will definitely win, or does Freeland have a chance, or perhaps even someone else? The last comment today comes from @DennisGriffith2670, who said, quote, as a Manitobian, I stand with Alberta and Smith and wish Wob would have the same backbone as Smith. As for Carney refusing independent media, it just shows he's another WEF/Trudeau dictator. Yeah, Canoe has constantly pulled at the top of premiers nationwide, and I'm curious to ask what impact you think the whole tariff dilemma and how premiers are handling it, notably Smith, might have on the public perception of premiers across the country. Let me know. That wraps up our comment roundup in this week's show. My name's Isaac Lamoureux, your host of the Alberta Roundup. Have a great weekend. Thank you and God bless. May Alberta prosper, strong and free.